My next guest, known as the Nostradamus of U.S. elections for correctly predicting 9 of the last 10 presidential races, using his own 13 keys to the White House, criteria a candidate must win in order to achieve victory. Well, he now says that he's ready to call the race. American University history professor Allan Lichtman joins me now. Professor, all right, here it is. Who will win the next president of the United States?
Joseph Jaffe is not famous. I'm famous. Joseph Jaffe is a delusional human being who thinks he's famous. He's not famous. He's not famous. I'm famous.
Joseph Jaffe. That's I believe that's a Japanese name. And but I tell you what, he's not famous. He's famouser than he was or used to was. But fame is fleeting, like a paperweight. It just comes and goes.
Am I being overconfident? Am I becoming complacent about complacency?
I think you are.
Oh, he's not the Messiah. He's just a very naughty boy.
Yeah, I've got big ears.
Brian doesn't want to see anyone else. Piss off.
That's the one, because you literally complete me and we complete each other.
You've obviously encountered discrimination in your own life by virtue of being Australian.
Hey, Manuel Kant was a real pissant who was very rarely stable.
I don't want to get too gushy, but I might just be saying you complete me, Dean. P&G now stands for Pritchard and Good.
Branding is not a bad blind date.
Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
You're
How
insane!
Did I do that? You're insane! Well, welcome everyone. It is Sunday night. It is live, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I am on the White House lawn. For some reason, the sun is still shining in the sky. Just the magic of smoke and mirrors. Look, it's Sunday night. There are, according to what I can see right now, 2.5 million people watching us on Twitter, or X, formerly Twitter. I don't even know if that matters anymore. But what does matter is that I've got the, I guess Warren Buffett, they called him the Oracle of Omaha. This man is the Oracle of presidential predictions. Professor Allan Lichtman is here. He is the man. He is in demand, let me tell you. And this guy has got a track record which is enviable. He has predicted 9 of the last 10 elections, and arguably got the 10th one correct as well. He was on my show about 4 years ago, and he's back again now. And hopefully he'll be back in another 4 years' time as well, especially if he keeps on calling it correctly. So he'll be on shortly. I'm now doing the show live at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Bob Farnham is watching on YouTube. He said Allan is famous. Of course, I am predictably not famous, or at least I'm not infamous. Celeste is here and she says hello. Please enjoy the show. Maybe you'll get a chance to ask the professor a question. Now, I'm doing a little bit of social audio in the morning. I call it the Collective Cafe. I'm on an amazing new social audio platform called Chatter. We've been doing some fantastic rooms like WTF with Elon Musk. What the hell is this man doing? Single-handedly flushing $41 billion down the drain, but that's another story for another day. We also had a wonderful room discussing little Elmo, who said, hey, everyone, just checking in. What's going on? And apparently people were like, Elmo, the world is burning, but thanks for checking in on us. Carolyn Boyd is here and saying, hello from Kentucky. Alan's going to tell you, Allan probably tell you where, which way Kentucky is going to vote. I think we know which way Kentucky is going to vote. That's another story for another day. Also, we've been doing live book reads of The 4 Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive, Crucial Conversations, and other business-related books. And if you want to listen to us, all you got to do is just subscribe bit.ly/collective cafe to go. But we are moving on with it because Alan's got some predicting to do. I always start off with a seated soliloquy in honor of my guest. And, you know, today I wanted to call it the key to the future. You know, Professor Lichtman has come up with a prediction, 13 keys to the White House. And I thought to myself, we all want to know what the key is. We want to know what the key is to the future. What is the key? What is a way to create certainty in a world that is just so uncertain? How do we create stability in a world that is so unstable? How do we create the ability to just know what's coming around the corner when the only certainty in life is change? What is the future? What do we want from the future? I think we want health. We want happiness. We don't want chaos. Today, we just found out that there was another assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. And I tweeted out, this is the new normal. Is this what we want? Do we want chaos? Do we need chaos? I don't know that we can control what's going to happen tomorrow, the next day, the day after that. But I think we do have certain keys that we can use in our daily life in terms of how we treat people, in terms of kindness, generosity, empathy, in terms of controlling the controllables and maybe not sweating the small stuff or just realizing there are some things that are out of our control. Sometimes we don't have the key to the future, but we might just have a key to our future. And that is what we can control. And that is what we can focus on. So with the next few months that are just going to be so unbelievably uncertain, maybe, just maybe, we can focus on things that we can control. I don't know, like our vote, and take it from there. And now it's time to bring Allan onto the show again, and I'm so happy that he's decided to join me. Let me tell you a little bit about Allan. He's an American historian. He has taught at American University in Washington, D.C. since 1973. Lichtman created the keys to the White House model with Soviet seismologist Vladimir Kalis-Borok in 1981. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. The model uses 13 true-false criteria to predict whether the presidential candidate of the incumbent party will win or lose the next election. Using this model, Lichtman has accurately predicted the outcome of 9 of the last 10 elections, including, well, I'd say excluding 1984. But again, you know, one might just say that he got that right. He predicted an Al Gore victory, but did caution his model only pertained to the popular vote. And then, of course, in 2016, he predicted a Donald Trump popular vote victory and afterwards revised his model to note that it picked the Electoral College winner. He actually ran for the U.S. Senate seat from Maryland in 2006. So this man is, he's versatile and he's back on the show. Allan, welcome back.
Thank you, but I got to correct you. You've badly misstated my predictions. I did not say I predicted Gore correctly because of the popular vote. What I said was I correctly predicted the winner based on the intent of the voters. Based on the intent of the voters, despite the Supreme Court stopping the recount, Al Gore should have won going away. I proved that in my report to the United States Commission on Civil Rights. It's still on their website. It showed that 1 out of every 9 to 10 votes cast by an overwhelmingly Democratic African-American electorate was tossed, compared to 1 out of 50 votes that were tossed for whites. If the two had been even, Al Gore would have won by tens of thousands of votes. Moreover, most of those votes tossed for African Americans were not these hanging chads or dimples. They were overvotes where African Americans didn't trust Florida, so they punched in Gore, and then they wrote in Gore just to make sure the intent was clear, but Florida tossed them. This was confirmed independently by a 2004 study 3 years later by Professor Walter Meebane of Cornell University, whose article was entitled The wrong man is elected president, exclamation point. And he validated my finding that Gore should have won by tens of thousands of votes. And I must correct you about 2016. I did not say that Donald Trump would win the popular vote. If you look at my Washington Post September 23rd interview, I said with crystal clarity that Trump was headed for a win. And at the same time, I predicted his impeachment, which would have made no sense if I was just predicting the popular vote. I actually got a letter of congratulations from Donald Trump for predicting his victory. I was co-winner of the Steckler Award for courage in forecasting. The academic community lauded my correct prediction. I published in the Harvard Data Science Review. I presented at the American Political Science Association. So I don't know where you get your ideas about my predictions, but they're just wrong.
So I will tell you, first of all, I absolutely will take the correction. I actually picked it up from Wikipedia. And
great source. Wikipedia. I've been trying to correct them for months and they won't let me correct them.
Well, that is,
you want
that
to
is
get
super
your information from Wikipedia, you might as well get it from the movies.
You know, actually, it's interesting, and I honestly I will take the criticism. It's the first time that Wikipedia that I've ever encountered such dissonance or such, from the source disagreement on the validity and the accuracy.
I'll tell you why.
I'm a little
there
shocked.
Are all kinds of people out there. I'll tell you why. There are all kinds of people out there who are trying to make their name for themselves, wannabes, by trading on my visibility and attacking me. And somehow they wormed their way into Wikipedia. And I have tried to correct it, and I haven't been able to break through. But I'll tell you, Wikipedia, 80% accurate, but you never know what that 20% that isn't accurate is going to be.
Well, and I humbly will, I will humbly ask for your forgiveness. And I will also
my forgiveness. I'm just upset because I get this all the time.
Well, you know what I'll do. You know what I'll do as well is I will advocate, by the way, on your behalf to get it changed.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, I do want to ask you one question, which is when people talk about 9 out of 10, I just want to make sure now that I'm talking to you in the source. Is that still correct to say 9 out of 10, or is it in fact 10 out of 10 based on what you just said?
We could argue about 2000 forever, but I think my study for the U.S. Commission of Civil Rights, which I also published in the Journal of Legal Studies, and Walter Meebane's article proved that the wrong person was elected president. Al Gore should have been president. So in that sense, I was correct. When I went on Bill Maher in 2000, after my successful in 2020, after my successful 2016 prediction, the first thing Bill Maher asked me, how did you F up 2000? And I gave him the same answer. I didn't F up. Florida F'd up. It, gave the votes to the wrong person.
Well, I just want to let you know that I have this for you. If you need it, we have this. So if you do want to use the F word, well, I can censor myself, but I can't censor you. So, Florida, you f up. Okay.
Yes,
anyway.
they sure did. And by the way, just 3 years later, the federal government, with overwhelming bipartisan support, passed the Help America Vote Act. You may have heard of that, of 2003. And it mandated that whenever there is an overvote, like those tens of thousands in Florida, the voter has to be given a chance to correct it. You can't just throw it out like Florida did. So that law had been in effect just 3 years earlier. Al Gore would have been president.
All right, so I'm here with Professor Allan Lichtman. This is take 2, who has correctly predicted 10 out of the last 10 elections. He's about to predict the 11th one on the trot. But before we do, I noticed this, and I hope this is correct as well, because, Wikipedia is dead to me, just for the record. Is it true that the prediction methods that we use for the keys were actually taken from a prediction method for earthquakes?
That's correct. I was the odd couple of political research, along with my friend and colleague, the late, great Vladimir Kailas-Borak. And we did indeed use the methodology of pattern recognition that they use in earthquake prediction. Of course, in earthquake prediction, they're looking at patterns in the physical environment associated with stability in earthquake. We looked at patterns in the political environment associated with stability. The White House party keeps power, and earthquake, they're booted out of power. And we applied that pattern recognition. Remember, this is 81 to every election from 1860 to 1980, going all the way back to the horse and buggy days of politics. And that's how we came up with the 13 keys. They're empirical. We didn't just make them up.
All right, so let's find out basically now whether there is going to be an earthquake or what kind of an earthquake there might be in November. You've obviously come out with your prediction. I did see a comment coming in on YouTube, a couple of people saying what your prediction is, but let's just assume people are living under a rock and they haven't heard yet. We're going to go through them, I guess one by one. Actually, that's not what I wanted to show you. What I wanted to show you is key number one. We're going to go through the 13 keys. This was this was created with a little bit of AI. So you're going to see your name in a lot of places, and this is how AI has interpreted your keys, Allan. But the first, well, actually, before we do that, why don't you just quickly set up and explain how the keys work?
Yes. The keys ignore the pundits who have no scientific basis for their opinion and no track record. They ignore the polls, which are snapshots and abused by clerks that compile polls like Nate Silver, who, remember, assured us Hillary Clinton had an overwhelming likelihood to win in 2016. The keys are unique among all prediction systems in that they tap into the structure of how American presidential elections really work. That is, as votes up or down in the strength and performance of the White House party. And that's what the keys gauge. They're true-false questions where an answer of true always favors stability. And if 6 or more are false, we get earthquake. Fewer than 6 that are false, we get stability. And unlike, the pundits and the pollsters and other models, the keys have a big message. And it's a very important message. The message is it's governing, not campaigning, that counts. That's why I very deliberately issued my prediction before the Harris-Trump debate to show that the ephemeral effects of the campaign have no impact on a prediction based on the fundamentals of how elections really work.
So you said governing, not campaigning.
Correct.
All right. So on the basis of governing, not campaigning, we're going to go through the 13 keys, and you'll let me know whether, in fact, the key is true or false. I do have some sound effects because, again, it is Sunday night at 9, and and life can be very serious, and sometimes we need a little bit of fun. So, Allan, let's start off with key number one. Key number one is party mandate.
Yes, that's based on U.S. House elections, looking at the latest election compared to the previous one and see if the White House party holds more seats. They don't. They lost, despite improving on expectations, they lost House seats in 2021. Key one is false.
So key one is false. All right, we took some sound effects from The Price is Right. As I said, we're very limited budget here, but I am in front of the White House. So let's go to key number two. Key number two, no primary contest.
Yeah, this is critical. I was very, very disparaging of the Democrats for trashing their incumbent president right out in the open. I've never seen that before. And I've been the founding to the present. I also thought that they were heading for disaster because not only would they create an open seat, but they would have a big party brawl and lose the contest key. However, I don't know if they listened to me or they just grew a spine and a brain. Democrats united almost unanimously behind Harris. There was no contest. That key is true.
This would be The Price is Right. So well done. A new car, Allan. Let's keep moving to number three. And by the way, no primary contest. Super interesting, obviously, because there's been a lot of controversy with respect to Vice President Harris, in terms of the fact that a lot of people have said that she hasn't really, earned any votes in order to become the party's candidate. And
that's a pile of nonsense.
It
She
is.
earned 99% of the delegates' vote. They could have voted for Governor Whitmer or Governor Newsom or Senator Booker or Senator Warren. They all chose to vote for Harris.
Oh, by the way, Jeff W. says, according to my 13 keys, my prediction is Allan keys. But I don't think that worked out well for him. And Kale said the midterms were in 2022, not 2021. So you're getting a lot of banter. And by the way, Jeff,
2021. I said 2022, the midterms. I'm not sure what that person's talking about. Obviously, the midterms are in 2022. If I had a slip of the tongue, I'm sorry, but I don't think I did.
I don't think you did either. And then Jeff, of course, said it's time for the Showcase Showdown. So we'll get back on with the show.
Let's move on.
Let's move on, exactly. Number 3, incumbent seeking re-election.
That's an obvious one. That's false. Once Biden stepped down, the vice president doesn't count. It didn't count when George H.W. Bush was running in 1988. Doesn't count now. That's obviously false.
That is obviously false. Let's move on. We get to number 4, no third party.
Well, no significant third party. And you have to anticipate that the third party candidate will get at least 5% of the vote. I don't know that. It's the only time I've got to turn to polls, but I don't take them at face value. We have the Lichtman wasted vote syndrome theory. I may love you, RFK Jr., but when I go to vote, I know you can't win, so I won't vote for you. So we're looking at polling at 10% or more. RFK Jr. is fizzled. He's out of the race. And I think that may have something to do with Harris, by the way, something I hadn't anticipated ahead of time. But with Harris rather than Biden, voters don't have to decide on the major parties between two old white guys anymore. I hate to say that, being an old white guy myself.
So am I, don't worry.
So that one is true, obviously.
There, and it's interesting because one thing I heard in an interview, Allan, is that, you have stayed resolute, that you've never, ever had to change the keys. The keys have never proven to flip once you've made a prediction. I think RFK Jr. was an interesting one because he was on the ballot. He represented a fairly significant. He was no Ross Perot, but but it's interesting that even when you made the prediction, he was still on, or he wasn't.
I think he had just stepped down, but it didn't matter because he had already fizzled down to 4 or 5%.
So I found that one to be quite interesting, and also to see how the keys kind of stay steady and stable regardless.
Let me comment on that because that's very important. I get 10 emails a day from people who think they know how better to define these keys than I do, or that the system does. And my answer is, feel perfectly free to develop your own prediction system based on your own understandings. But if you're going to use my system, you've got to stick with how the keys are very precisely defined and how they've been answered from 1860 to the present. And by the way, none of these critics have their own system. They just want to take shots at mine. And I welcome it. It's far better to be attacked than to be ignored.
I love your style. I love your personality. In fact, even when we met 4 years ago, you stand your ground. You called me out like at the beginning. I'm like, it's so good to have you back on the show. And we need more healthy debate sometimes. And we also need sometimes a bit of humility to say, I was wrong. And so certainly
Nate Silver never says he's wrong. So he says 70 to 80% Clinton's going to win, right? Then she loses. And he says, see, I told you there was a 20 to 30% chance that she would lose. So he can't ever be wrong because it means you can't ever be right. I am right or wrong. I tell you who's going to win. And my stuff is falsifiable. I can fall off that limb every 4 years. I'm 77 and I still have my butterflies when I make a prediction.
I'm pretty sure, even at the age of 77, that there are a few elections before the 10 that you predicted that you were not around for, going back to
I did not
maybe
know Abraham Lincoln, I assure you.
I never said you did, but I'm actually curious. Have you ever? I never asked you this question before. Have you ever gone back and retroactively looked at how the keys would have performed over the last, beyond the last 10 elections?
Oh, absolutely. Remember, we developed the keys before we made a prediction. We developed the keys in 1981, and we looked at every election from 1860 to 1980.
And how did you do across all of those elections?
We looked at all those elections. We looked at an array of indicators, and our research produced the indicators that best separated stability and earthquake, and those were the 13 keys. People have also suggested, well, maybe you need to pare down the keys. Maybe we could just go with 4 or 5. And if I'd followed, I've been getting those suggestions for 40 years. If I'd followed them, I would have made errors.
By the way, Jeff says, also from Michigan here, and 50-year-old white guy in solid, Kamala voter. So, old white guys, there are 3 of us left, so we may as well stick together.
Hey, 50 looks young to me at 77.
Apollo says, believe in the keys. So, in keys we trust, in Lichtman we trust. Let's move on. Let's move on. All right. We are strong short-term economy.
Very quantitatively defined. There's no recession in the election year. I don't call recessions. The economists do. Clearly, there's no recession this year. You can't have a recession in less than 2 months. That's not going to happen. Now, I know a lot of people say, but there's inflation, there's a vibe session, people are unhappy about this or that. And my answer is, that's not the key. Again, you want to develop your own system based on some kind of poll results, which are ephemeral and very different depending on what you're looking at, go right ahead. But if you're going to use my key, it's quantitatively defined in terms of recession.
I do want to just make a quick point before we move on, which is this has been a subject of tremendous politicking and campaigning as opposed to governing, to your point, where, of course, economy being the number one issue to so many voters, and the spin on, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago, and talking about actually the state of the economy, sometimes ignoring news like, for example, falling unemployment, etc. So this resonates to me, which is one would think that when it comes to the economy, these keys would not be in favor of Harris versus Trump, and you're saying that is not how the key is defined. So I'm just
not even close. Not even key is very specifically defined as no recession in the election year. As I said, I've never seen anyone successfully have a track record of prediction by looking at polling about the economy, which depends on how you phrase the question, what you're asking about. It changes throughout the year. This is, again, not something I guessed at. This, like all other keys, is based upon the pattern recognition research over 120 years of elections that Kyla Sporak and I completed.
All right. So speaking about a quantification, strong long-term economy, real per capita economic growth during the term equals or exceeds mean growth during the previous 2 terms. This does not seem to have been thumb sucked out of the air.
No, this again is very specific, very quantitative. It's clearly true. Such growth under Biden has been about double the average of the previous 2 years. So both short and long-term economic keys are true. We've been through 6 keys, only 2 false: mandate and incumbency.
All right. There's some good comments, but we're going to keep moving on. Number 7, major policy change.
That's a very clear one. There's no dispute that the policies of the Biden administration are fundamentally different in virtually every regard than the policies of the Trump administration. And it just says policy change, doesn't say popular policy change or policy change that's good. Of course, these are all value judgments, just plain old change, clearly big change from Trump to Biden. That's true.
Jeff Crusan says, hello to the professor. It's Jeff C., your YouTube live chat moderator. We got your back. People just have to read the book. So you have friends all over. And, there's also, Alan, some really good comments in the chat at the moment about male versus female. Question asked by MJ Santander, is there a key for a female candidate? What are your thoughts just on dealing with unprecedented candidates, for example, a female candidate?
Every 4 years, some critic says to me, this election's unprecedented. Got to change your key. We have an African American running. Never had that before. Country's not ready to elect an African American. We have a woman running in 2016. Never had that before. Got to change your keys. We have a major party candidate bragging on tape to grabbing women by their private parts. Certainly never had that. Got to change your keys. And I have two answers. One, you can't change a model on the fly. That's clearly a way of producing errors. You got to have a whole basis for it. And two, the keys are incredibly robust. Developmentally, they go all the way back to 1860 when women didn't vote. Black people were enslaved. We had no automobiles, no planes, no radio, no television. We were an agricultural society. Our demography was totally different. So the keys have endured vastly greater changes than anything we've seen in recent elections.
Monty Byrne said, I'm a true believer in the keys now, because after the debate, it is still considered a toss-up, that after the debate, it is still considered a toss-up, which is amazing to him. Debates don't play into the keys. I think if people are watching, anything that you take away is that these keys have stood the test of time, and they don't bend or break whichever direction the wind is blowing. And certainly with all of this, I mean, the last 4 years the last 8 years have been unprecedented. So just wanted to make that point again. All right.
You're really right on. Ever since we corrected the very beginning, you've been right on with everything.
Thank you. What do they say? You don't get a second chance to make a good first impression. You do get a second chance to make a second impression. So I'm glad I'm back in your good graces. Now, this one is an interesting one, all right, because we're talking about social unrest, no social unrest. First of all, explain the key, and then I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah, again, you can't understand the keys just from a two-word, cheat sheet. The definition is very clear. It has to be massive, sustained social unrest, sufficient to call into question the stability of society, like in the late 60s and early 70s, when millions of people were in the streets. There was chaos, there was riots, there were police killings of demonstrators. Nothing like that. In fact, I was looking very carefully at the 68 convention, remember, that descended into violence and chaos, and seeing if we would get a repeat of that. Not even close. And again, just with the third party key, I think having Harris as the nominee dampened social unrest, because the protest was directed against Biden, and Biden is no longer front and center in the Democratic Party. So that one is clearly true.
All right. The reason why I wanted to ask you a question, clearly, I would assume when we spoke about the George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, that would have been considered. Would that have been considered social unrest?
There were millions of people in the streets. There was chaos. There was violence. There were people being killed. Nothing, troops and National Guards being called out. Nothing comparable to anything we've seen this year.
So now I'm going to try and ask you one more question about this before we move on, which is, in light of these assassination attempts against Trump, in light of Springfield, Ohio, and fomenting doubt and backlash against immigrants, could this be in this particular case almost inflaming and manipulating a key, but actually creating political unrest?
Haven't seen it. Haven't seen millions of people getting out in the street or anything like that. But I know the Republicans know the keys, and it wouldn't surprise me if they're attempting to manipulate them. Look, I can't tell you anything technically about even if it is an assassination, whatever happened down there. But I can tell you this, and I wrote a whole book about this. Everyone in America is at risk because of our lack of gun control. School children, ordinary citizens, prominent figures like Donald Trump. Get this, an American is 20 times, not 20%, 20 times more likely to be murdered by a gun than residents of our closest peer democracies, the G7 group of nations plus Australia. And all these nations have the same problems of mental health and drugs and gangs. That ain't it. The sole difference is how they control guns compared to the US. And you can check out my book, Repeal the Second Amendment, The Case for a Safer America, St. Martin's, 2018.
Alan, I'm giving you, before we move on, I'm giving you the air horn because I have to tell you on a very personal note, it's yet another way, another time that you and I are in lockstep. After what happened in Newtown, I became essentially a single issue voter. I just did.
Wow.
I just did. I just said we just cannot afford to let one more of our babies perish at the hands of these war machines.
Yeah,
So,
it's guns that are common denominator. All these people are different. There's nothing common about them except the gun.
so all right. Well, let's move on. Let's move on to, I said it before you did. Let's get to scandal. No scandal.
No, my favorite key, of course, is the scandal key. We've had some very juicy scandals with Watergate and
Haven't we
Bill
just?
Clinton and Donald Trump. But for 4 years, Republicans have been trying to pin a scandal on Biden and come empty. Their smoking gun witness, supposedly Mr. Smirnoff, was arrested by the FBI for lying and spreading Russian propaganda. And the way the key is defined again, it has to directly implicate the president, not the president's son or like the reprobate Billy Carter, Jimmy Carter's brother. That doesn't count. And there has to be some bipartisan recognition of scandal. So nothing Republicans have come up with has come close. That key is true.
All right. So the key is clearly true. I'm assuming 4 years ago, the key was false.
Oh, absolutely. There was,
I'm saying that rhetorically, but when you say bipartisan,
plenty of bipartisan recognition of wrongdoing. I mean, Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney, solid Republicans being very critical.
So that was enough in that case to call it bipartisan in terms of, but it was a bit of a no-brainer. I was just curious as to
even not a majority, but a non-unsubstantial chunk of Republican rank and file maybe didn't think he should be impeached and convicted, but they still thought there was wrongdoing going on.
All right, we are live on YouTube, we are live on Twitter, we are live on LinkedIn, and we're going to wrap up. There are 4 more keys.
Yes.
When I saw you predicting, coming out with your prediction a couple weeks ago, the next 2 keys, I believe, were still undecided. The first one was no foreign or military failure.
Yeah, let me say, in that very brief video, I didn't get into this because it didn't matter. We're only down 2 keys at the moment. And no way all the last 4 would have to fall no matter what happened with these keys. But pressed, I split them, which I think is an accurate reflection of diplomacy under Biden. I said no foreign military failure is false. Gaza is a humanitarian disaster, an embarrassment to the world with no end in sight. I know we don't have boots on the ground there, but we're heavily invested. That's a failure. I gave Biden a success. It was Biden and Biden alone who put together the coalition of the West that stopped Putin from conquering Ukraine and then moving on, as he surely would have, to threatening our NATO allies. And continued support from Biden, despite Republican resistance, has kept Ukraine going for over 2.5 years and even enabled them to make an incursion into Russian territory. This will go down as an historic presidential achievement, so I rate that one true. So we're now down 3 keys.
All right, so we went from no foreign failure to well, this is the one that you were talking about, right? Which is the next one
Success.
would
Yes.
be major foreign or military success, and how they were split. I do think what's interesting, I guess my question for you, and I'm also looking for questions coming from YouTube and Twitter, etc., is if there is a ceasefire, if the hostages are returned, and hopefully they will be, will that change the key?
I've been talking a lot about that for months. People, when Biden was still in, kept asking me, what does Biden have to do to win this election? What does he have to say? And I said, that's irrelevant. Govern well. And the most important thing you could do to help yourself would be against all, odds, against the belligerent Netanyahu, the murderous Hamas, to somehow broker a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza. I don't like to talk in hypotheticals because the devil is in the details, but that's the one thing that could shake up that key.
Okay, interesting. And right now the keys are split. And
Yes.
if they did shake up the key, that would be yet another one. Well, we'll do our tally count in a moment.
Right.
The
We're down
last
three at the moment.
We're down 3 at the moment. And so now we get to the final two.
Yes.
And it is a charismatic incumbent.
This is probably my most misunderstood key. It is an incredibly high threshold key. When you see how it's defined and how it's been answered, only about half a dozen candidates since 1900 have fit, because the definition is you have to be one of those once in a generation, inspirational, transformational, across the board candidates. The iconic examples are Franklin Roosevelt and Ronald Reagan. Whatever you may think of Harris, one way or the other, she hasn't yet, and really hasn't a chance to rise up to the level of a Franklin Roosevelt. So the incumbent charisma key is false. That's a fourth key. Then we get to the challenger charisma key. And, I get so much flack about, certainly Trump is charismatic. And my answer is maybe so in the eyes of some, but he doesn't fit the definition of the key, which is to be broadly appealing, transformational, across party lines. You cannot be like Trump and just appeal to a narrow base. 4 years as president, his approval rating averaged 41%, right at the bottom historically of all presidents. He lost 2 elections by a combined 10 million votes of the people. FDR and Reagan won 6 elections in overwhelming landslides. So yes, Trump's a showman, but clearly does not fit the definition of the key. And that one is true. There is not a charismatic challenger according to the keys. So we're only down 4 keys, 2 keys short of what's needed to predict an incumbent party defeat. That's why when I kind of made my quick video, I said I didn't have to make a final call on the 2 very tricky foreign policy keys. We have wars going on. Wars are very fluid, because even if they both flipped against the Democrats, that would still be 5 keys down, 1 key short of what's needed to predict their defeat. I don't think they're both going to flip. I still think it's going to be 4 keys. Either way, the keys to the White House predict that we are going to have a new and path-breaking president, that Kamala Harris will become the first woman president of the United States, at least cracking, if not shattering, the glass ceiling, and she'll become the first president of mixed African and East Asian descent, kind of foreshadowing where the country is going. We're rapidly becoming a majority-minority country.
Well, listen, you heard it here first, or maybe you didn't hear it here first, and you've watched Allan about 25 times. This is the Showcase Showdown. There are 2.3 million people watching on Twitter right now, and they just got to see the fact that, or got to hear or see the fact that you've predicted a Kamala Harris victory. I am going to take every last bit of crypto that I've saved up over the last 4 years, and I'm betting it on Harris. And I'm doing it. In you I
Joseph,
trust.
I always tell people, don't bet on me. I don't want to be responsible.
Listen, I've bet on you since the moment I laid eyes on you. I have a few really good questions as we
Yeah,
wind
let's
down.
wrap up.
Yeah,
Go
so I
ahead.
thought they were really good ones. Richard actually asked, does a second assassination attempt on Trump hours ago have any effect on the keys? Apparently, obviously, this is alleged. The person arrested is an extreme pro-Ukraine fanatic.
Yeah, again, this does not fit within the ambit of the keys, so no.
Even with a connection to foreign policy or
I
foreign
don't
interest.
see a connection. Look, I don't know anything about the second one, but the first one was not someone who was ideological or connected to foreign governments. He was someone who wanted to kill a major figure, and he didn't care who it was.
All right. MJ said, I think Waltz and Harris are charismatic. Have you seen the crowds? But obviously, if you've been listening to the prof says, charisma is Barack Obama charisma. Whether you loved him or hated him, he was charismatic. Bob,
transformational, and we don't know that yet about Harris.
We don't. Bob said that was really interesting. I'm glad I got to tune in. Thank you so much. The last question for you from our audience, Frederick Marone says, I would love if Allan answered this question. That's why I had to ask it in caps. Why do charismatic challenges arise when so many other keys have fallen, such as 1980, 1932, 80, 96, 2008?
A very astute question. And there's a good reason for it, because they see an opening. They see an opportunity. Let me give you the example of FDR. He did not plan to run in 1932. He thought Hoover would fill out 2 terms. Then when the country went sort of down the drain during the Great Depression, Franklin Roosevelt decided he would run 4 years earlier than he planned, and of course beat Hoover in an overwhelming landslide.
And there you have it, Allan. You've been, as always, kind, gracious. Sometimes, you know what? If nothing, the one thing that you've always been is just super honest and direct. We need more direct conversation. We need healthy debate. We need sometimes a little bit of conflict as well. And I always find a quote. This is the quote that I found for you. This is almost Yogi Berra-like. In fact, it's from Casey Stengel, who said, never make predictions, especially about the future. But you've been right. I certainly hope for our sanity and for the end of chaos. You are right again. What do you think about the quote? Never make. You're not Nate Silver. Never make predictions, especially about the future.
Right. He was so often wrong. Let me say this. I can stress that my predictions are nonpartisan. My first call was for Ronald Reagan's win in re-election in April 1982, in the midst of the worst recession since the Great Depression, when his approval rating was in the low 40% range, when 60% of Americans thought he was too old to run. Ronald Reagan, not exactly, consistent with my partisan views. And of course, I predicted Trump in 2016, which did not make me popular in 90% plus Democratic Washington, D.C., where I teach at American University. But I did get a letter of congratulations, which said, congrats, Professor, good call, and in big Sharpie letters signed, Donald J. Trump. So I want to close by telling your audience the most important thing to be a successful predictor. You got to know math, but that ain't it. Got to know politics, but that ain't it. Got to know history, but that ain't it. The most important thing is keeping your own political views out of it. That's hard. I trained as a historian for many years. And the critical thing is to be self-reflective, to make sure, when you reflect on what you're doing, you're not being influenced by your own partisan political views. I find it very amusing, although often painful. The same people who were lauding the keys and saying how great they were when I was essentially alone, virtually alone, in predicting Trump in 2016. Now that all I've done is predict a Democrat Harris, they suddenly have turned around and claimed, oh, I'm just biased, and that's why I'm predicting Harris. Arrant nonsense. I would not have predicted Reagan Trump, also George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush, if I was just predicting Democrats.
Please follow Allan on X at Allan at Allan Lichtman. He's also on Instagram. You want
And
to
I have a live show. Can I tell everyone about my live show? There it is.
There it
Tuesdays
is.
and Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern at Allan Lichtman YouTube. Joseph, you're right on top of it.
Exactly, and he's written a bunch of books. Look, I appreciate you more than you could know, and you are a man of many, many talents. I'm not going to let you go without mentioning the fact that you also you won the gold medal in 800-meter run in the 2024 Maryland Senior Olympics. Is there anything you cannot do? Oh, wait a second. You also were the biggest nationwide quiz show winner in tic-tac-toe in 1981. You are a competitive man, and you are a winner, and evidenced by your keys. So,
my wife also, I qualified for the nationals by winning my medals in Maryland. My wife also qualified, not in track, but in swimming. So we are the power couple, and we are both going to the National Senior Olympics. And she's also the head of a political action committee on climate change, Vote Climate Pack US.
Unbelievable. You're a mensch as well. Carolyn Boyd says, great interview. Thank you. Trisha says, I'm praying Allan is correct too. He's such a knowledgeable man. This is basically where you come just to feel good about yourself. And you should.
Thank you. But I know I'm only human. Of course I can be wrong. I don't expect to be, but that can happen.
Well, thank you for the service that you have provided, Allan. And you know what? Don't be a stranger, but even if you are, I'll see you back, I guess, in 4 years' time, where you can continue to be correct in everything you do. Thank you for coming on the show.
Biden. I hope I make it there. Thank you so much, Joseph. Good night.
Good night, and we'll be back very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.